On my recent trip to Poland, I heard something profound. My tour guide said that Jews in Krakow, Poland are like a phantom limb. Its absence hurts. In a way, I'm that phantom limb. I'm a Jew here in Poland for the first time, but really, I'm just an American Jew, another tourist. And yet, my father is a Polish citizen. My grandfather was from Poland. I don't know what to make of this country, which feels so strangely far and near. I'm here with Professor Naomi Seidman from University of Toronto, and we are attending the annual Krakow Jewish Festival. But first, we get comfortable in our Airbnb in the Jewish neighborhood of Kazimierz in the gorgeous city of Krakow.
This is our beautiful apartment. We don't really want to go anywhere else because it's so much nicer than where we live, right?
We visit the Beis Yaakov Girls' School, where in the interwar period, Jewish girls and women like us took tours to historic sites in Kazimierz. Little did they know of the story that would unfold next. We walk through those same places.
Hello. Hi, ladies. Hi, Naomi. Hello.
Hi, I'm Frida.
Nice to meet you. I'll be your guide today in
Thank you.
Jewish Krakow. So this is the Jagiellonian University of Kraków, and this is where I've studied. And when I got my master's, the university is over 700 years old. Yes? It was founded in 1364 by the King Kazimierz the Great. After the war, the Jewish past of Poland was really a taboo, and it was such a sensitive subject. People didn't want to talk about it. And even when I was born in the 80s, so when I was at school in the 90s, we didn't talk about the Jews. When we were using this word, the Jew, we were saying this in a lower level, as if it was something, not appropriate. What makes Kraków very special in comparison to different Polish cities or European cities where there were Jewish communities is the fact that Kraków was not destroyed. Kraków wasn't bombed, so it was invaded, it was occupied 5 years, 4 months and 12 days of the war by the Nazis, but it was not destroyed. So a lot of the buildings, including the synagogues, survived. They were all plundered, and what was to be stolen was stolen, but they are still standing here. And there is one little element that I care a lot about, so I have to show you. You have a trace here of the old original mezuzah, where the mezuzah case was. And there's about maybe 15 traces like this all over Kazimierz. When they are in the stone frame door, yes, they are very characteristic. You can see them, easy to spot. But they are often also in the wooden door frames. When you enter the buildings, you can walk floor by floor, apartment by apartment, and observe the right-hand side, and you see sometimes only tiny holes from the nails where the mezuzah was attached. What is also fascinating is sometimes when you go out from the Jewish quarter, from Kazimierz, when you go to different areas of Kraków, in the old town, in the center, and you also find the old mezuzah traces. So it shows how this community was diverse. It was not only living in this district, but it lived all over the city. And also that it identified itself as Jewish because they attached the mezuzah on the door frames. They were not afraid of doing it, and it was a custom.
But notice how they didn't put the mezuzah right
On
over
the same
old
spot.
spot, which is good, right?
Yeah, yes, because they're not taking
don't want
over.
They don't act that the past needs to have its say.
You have also another mural or artistic example here. Yes, it's a big mural. It's a tribute to Ephraim Moses Lilien, a painter that was a student of Polish most famous painter that every child here knows, Jan Matejko, from 19th century. Jan Matejko was director of Academy of Fine Arts here. And Ephraim Moses Lilien was his student, and then he immigrated to Palestine, and then he worked at the Bezalel
He was
school.
like the Zionist artist.
I see.
But
it
with
was
roots
art-
here.
The Cholzman, the eight, which in
Oh, wow,
to everything there is a season.
Wow, I can't believe you can
Book of
read that.
Ecclesiastes.
This is the oldest synagogue that there is in Poland. It's called the Old Synagogue. It's a museum today, so we don't need to visit. It explains Jewish traditions and Jewish rituals. So this is where we are on Szeroka Street, and this is the heart of the Jewish quarter. So from early medieval times, this is where the Jews had lived, in Kazimierz. This was only for Jewish people. At some point there was also a wall around the Jewish section. There are 7 synagogues here. But to be precise, pre-war there was 120 synagogues and prayer houses in Kraków. These were just 7 main synagogues, but there was 120 and they were all around the city. Let's have a look at this synagogue, which is the only active synagogue in Kraków. So this synagogue, it's called, in Polish we call it Remu, but the proper name is Ramah. It's Rabbi Moses Izeles. This was the synagogue that was founded by his father in 16th century. And since 16th century, apart for 5 years of the German occupation, it's an open synagogue with prayers ongoing. It's a small one because it was a private synagogue. It was just for the family and the closest members and friends. You know, yet today is the one that is active. So it's kind of shows you the circle of the Jewish life here.
It's like a synagogue that's more a tourist attraction than a place
It
of
is,
worship.
yeah. Most of the days, only for Shabbat it's closed, and then you don't pay for the entrance. If you come here for prayer, then you just for prayer. So this is the original Aron HaKodesh from 16th century. What is also preserved from the past are the paintings on the ceiling. They are not that old, they are 17th, 18th century, but they have been discovered while I'm guiding here, like throughout the last 10 years only maybe. So when I started guiding, it was all white, and then they found out that below the white paint there are actually polychromies from the past. So you have there the tomb of Rachel, the Noah's Ark, and the Wailing Wall on those 3 panels. And something very characteristic for Polish synagogues, you also have zodiac signs. Yes? You may find it in many Polish synagogues, not that much outside of Poland.
So a person worries about losing his blood, doesn't help.
The materialistic world will not help him, but the days will not come back.
I
So
see. Okay.
it's both. It's lose.
Twice.
So here you have the matzeva, and this is not the original one. The original one is from behind, so we can walk around to see it. And you have here the text, 4th from the bottom, Mi Moshe ad Moshe lo kam k Moshe. From Moses to Moses, there was no one like Moses. And this sentence referred to Rambam, but in this case it refers to him, and it was written to him in 16th century. So it was, like to elevate him, to show how important he was. And you can actually see how many Jewish pilgrims come here, because all those kvitels are brought here by Jewish religious people. They're not written by local people, for sure. Local people come here only when they are on a school trip.
Wow.
This cemetery is the oldest Jewish cemetery in Poland. There is another one from this era in Wrocław and in Lublin from 16th century. During the war, most of the tombstones were gone here. There was a story about what happened with the tomb of Ramah. A Nazi came to destroy it because it was still standing, and a sudden lightning killed him. So there are also legends.
I have not seen mitzvahs with tin on it.
So this tin is just to protect the stones from erosion, from water, from it's because this is a 500-year-old stone that commemorates someone real, with name and surname, someone from my city that had lived here, walked on this street where we just had, go to this synagogue, mikveh on the other side of the street. So we want to protect these letters, and we cover them with stones. I mean, the city.
Someone does.
Someone did it, yeah. So after during the war, there was a garbage pit organized here by the Germans, and it was kind of like not a place to go to. And after the war, it remained for many years the same. And in the end of the 50s, they wanted to make a park out of this place because it was such a ugly place, just garbage all around. I would never come here as a child, never. It's not considered safe. And then the community, the Jewish community said, no, don't do the park here. It's a cemetery. So they said, okay, so if it's a cemetery, you do something about it. Yes? And then this part, I'm not a specialist on halacha, but it's against the halacha to dig here at the cemetery. But they digged this part out. They took the earth out and they uncovered the tombstones.
Wow.
But maybe this is a greater good, yes, because then you save the cemetery when you do archaeological excavations here. And they found out that so many of the tombstones are not broken; they are in one piece. It's amazing. You also have many that are broken, but look how many are in one piece. The way you see them, it doesn't mean that they were buried the same way. Probably they were not. Some of them we know where they were buried because some photos are preserved from pre-war. And many of those tombstones that were found broken were used for this wall.
Wow, look at the wall.
Yeah, this wall is very beautiful, and it also speaks a lot, says a lot, no? Because you have all those fragments of crushed lives. This is all pre-war. This is 16th, 17th century, but.
Wow. I think that one of the reasons you're in the business you're in is because you live in a city with all this. You live in a city that's layered.
Yeah, but there's also 1 million people living here. Not everyone is doing it. So I guess it must be some combination of I don't know, circumstances. Also,
and personality, obviously.
Personality. In my family, there was a lot of tragic stories during the war.
Well, your family was displaced.
Yeah.
Displaced, and my great-grandfather was murdered by the Nazis in October 1939 in the middle of the city. It was just by the town hall. They killed him. The family lost everything from both sides, paternal, maternal, houses. They were uprooted. They moved here. And I haven't realized that the story of the war and surviving is also the story that is in my genes. I've been working as a guide for a couple of years already, and I was attending groups like Jewish groups about the Holocaust, and sometimes listening to those speakers. And it never occurred to me that, well, actually, if I will tell now the story of my grandparents, it would be the same. The difference is that they were not Jewish. Maybe not the same, yes, but it would be also a lot of full of suffering. So I wanted to show you this building that is in front of us. Look at this closely because it's a new building. I don't know, from the 70s or 80s. Maybe this one here to the right.
Got it.
It's not a pre-war building, and they have Jewish names. They look like from Fiddler on the Roof. Yeah? It's fiction. It's a scenography. It's like in a movie. And there is a Polish writer. She's Jewish, Monika Schneiderman. She has a publishing house called Czarne. She said that the absence of Jewish people in Poland is like the phantom pain. It's like you had the whole body, whole organism, and you cut one limb.
Phantom leg syndrome.
Yeah.
And it aches you even though it's not there.
Yeah.
So it's the emptiness aches you. And I guess maybe more sensitive people feel this pain.
Yeah.
And sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously, they do things like that. I mean, why do you recreate pre-war entrances to the shops? The Jews are no longer here, yes? Some are Jewish, some are actually not Jewish.
Food, right?
Yeah. And it's a very beautiful metaphor, I think.
Yeah,
because
I actually think that is very beautiful.
There's a Yiddish poet in Israel called Rivka Basman, and she has a poem about going to the doctor, and she says to the doctor, "It's tut mir weh, it hurts," and the doctor says, "Gornish do, there's nothing there," and she says, "Gornish do tut mir weh."
which means
There being nothing, the absence.
the absence.
The
Nothing
absence.
there hurts.
Yeah, it's the
There's
absence.
nothing
Yeah,
there.
so that's
nothing
exactly
there hurts.
could be also the metaphor for the Jewish presence in Poland.
In a way, my trip to Poland was just my first introduction to the land, a beautiful, uplifting, thought-provoking trip. The festival full of singing, dancing, lectures, remembrance of Jewish life, new Jewish life. That moment on Shabbos in the old train station of singing Kazmierz with so many others felt like that phantom limb was not so phantom at all, and I felt a deep stirring. Then, when I got home, I published my conversation with Naomi that I had with her on our Airbnb balcony and received responses I'd never gotten in my entire career as a Jewish content creator. Venomous, full of anger at Jews for our pain over the Holocaust and what's seen as our insufficient duty to Poles. It's left me with a sour taste in my mouth, a pit in my stomach, with so many questions, but Janina's gentle guidance as a non-Jew who showed me her country as a Pole who cares about our shared historic suffering remains a recorded comfort that I enjoy to sit down and look back on. And now, perhaps, I will start to work on my Polish citizenship.